What are you doing in my house?
Benjamin George's $12,000 Italian leather shoes click against marble as he descends his staircase at 6:47 a.m., earlier than usual. He's reaching for his phone when he hears it, a sound that doesn't belong in his meticulously silent home. Scrubbing. Someone is scrubbing his floor. His security system shows no alerts. Fury rises in his chest as he rounds the corner and sees them. Two small black girls in a navy uniform 3 sizes too large, on their hands and knees with industrial brushes, their hair tied back in identical puffs, their faces streaked with tears and determination. "What are you doing in my house?" His voice is thunder. The girls freeze, and the smaller one, Jessica, begins to cry. The older one, Jennifer, stands on trembling legs and does something that will haunt Benjamin for the rest of his life. She kneels and clasps her hands together. "Please, sir, please don't call the police. Our mama fell." One question hung in the air between them, not about trespassing, not about broken security codes, but about what happens when privilege looks directly into the eyes of sacrifice and has to choose what kind of man it wants to be. Before this story unfolds, tell us where you're watching from and what time it is where you are. And if stories about courage in small hands and redemption in unexpected places move your soul, make sure you're subscribed. Because what this billionaire does next, no one saw it coming. Wednesday morning arrived the way it always did in Southwest Atlanta, with the sound of someone else's alarm bleeding through thin walls and the smell of coffee Doris couldn't afford to buy anymore. 4:30 a.m. The numbers on her phone glowed like an accusation. Doris Welch's body knew this routine so well she barely needed consciousness for it. Feet to floor. Wince through the stiffness in her knees. Reach for the uniform hanging on the bathroom door, navy blue, industrial fabric that never quite lost the smell of bleach and lemon cleaner no matter how many times she washed it. The apartment was a 1970s relic, the kind of building that had probably been considered modern once, but now just felt tired. Beige walls, brown carpet worn through to the padding in the hallway. An elevator that had stopped working in July and according to the superintendent would be fixed when corporate sends the parts. 6 months of climbing stairs. 6 months of feeling it in her joints. But complaining was a luxury, like new shoes or a coffee that didn't come from a gas station. Doris moved through the small kitchen, assembling her day in careful increments. Sandwich for lunch, peanut butter, the cheap kind that separated if you didn't stir it. Refillable water bottle. The small Bible her grandmother had given her before she passed, its leather cover soft from decades of worried hands. Her keys on the faded red lanyard the twins had made her for Mother's Day 3 years ago, back when Jennifer was obsessed with friendship bracelets and Jessica still believed in fairy godmothers. Her mind cataloged the day ahead with the precision of someone who couldn't afford to forget anything. George Mansion by 7 a.m. sharp. Mr. George didn't like seeing staff, which meant she had to be done with the main floors before he came downstairs at 8. Then the bus downtown to the office building on Peachtree. 2 hours of bathrooms and break rooms and conference rooms where people made in one day what she made in a month. Home by 4 to help the twins with homework, make dinner from whatever was left in the refrigerator, and maybe, if her body allowed it, sit down for 20 minutes before starting it all again tomorrow. She glanced into the twins' room before leaving. Jennifer and Jessica slept in their twin bed, pushed against the wall because the room was too small for 2 separate ones. They'd kicked off their blanket again, their legs tangled together the way they'd been in the womb. Jessica's mouth was slightly open. Jennifer's hand clutched her sister's shirt, even in sleep. Doris felt the familiar ache in her chest, the one that had nothing to do with her body and everything to do with loving someone more than you love yourself. Just keep them safe, she whispered to God or the universe or whoever was listening at 4:30 in the morning. Just keep them fed. She pulled the door closed quietly and headed for the stairs. The building's exterior staircase was concrete and unforgiving. The kind of architectural choice made by people who'd never had to climb it with groceries or laundry or a body that had been working since before sunrise. The overhead light on the 3rd floor landing had been out for 2 weeks. Doris had stopped reporting things like that. Nothing got fixed anyway. She descended carefully in the pre-dawn darkness, her right hand on the railing, her bag over her left shoulder. 42 steps to the ground. She'd counted them so many times the number lived in her bones. The rain from the night before had left everything slick and treacherous. She could smell it, That particular scent of wet concrete and city runoff. Her shoes were the same practical black sneakers she'd been wearing for 3 years, the soles worn smooth in places, but still functional. New shoes cost money. Money meant a choice between shoes and the electricity bill. The electricity bill meant the twins could do homework after dark. So the shoes stayed. Step 37 was where everything changed. Her foot found the wet patch. A slick of rainwater pooled in a depression where the concrete had cracked and settled. For a fraction of a second, her brain registered what was happening. Her body tried to compensate. Physics had other plans. Her foot slipped. Her arms windmilled, grasping for balance that was already gone. Her bag flew from her shoulder, its contents exploding into the air like some kind of terrible slow-motion ballet. The sandwich in its plastic bag. Her keys, the red lanyard flashing in the dim light. Her grandmother's Bible, its pages fluttering open as it tumbled. Then gravity took over with merciless efficiency. Her shoulder hit first, the impact so sudden her body didn't have time to brace. Then her ribs against the concrete edge of the step. Then her head, a crack that sounded worse than it felt, but only because the pain hadn't registered yet. The world tilted. Great. Went silent except for a ringing that might have been in her ears or in the universe itself. She tried to move and couldn't. Tried to breathe and felt something sharp and wrong in her chest. Tried to call for help and found her voice had disappeared into the darkness that was rapidly swallowing everything else. The last thing she thought before consciousness left her was, the twins. Who's going to get the twins to school? Then nothing. She woke to fluorescent lights and a stranger's face hovering above her. Young, black, kind eyes behind blue surgical mask. A name tag that read Keisha Thompson, RN. Welcome back, Ms. Welch, the nurse said gently. You're at Grady Memorial. You took a pretty serious fall. Try not to move too much, okay? Doris tried to sit up, and the pain that exploded through her body made her gasp, a sound that was half scream, half sob. Everything hurt. Her head throbbed, like something was trying to break out from inside her skull. Her ribs felt like they were made of broken glass. Her left shoulder wouldn't move at all. Your daughters are in the waiting room, Keisha continued, her hand gentle on Doris's good shoulder, keeping her still. They rode with you in the ambulance. Brave little things. Held your hand the whole way and didn't cry once until we told them you'd be okay. Daughters. The word cut through the pain fog. Jennifer. Jessica. What time is it? Doris's voice came out cracked and desperate. Almost 11 a.m. 11. She was supposed to be at the office building on Peachtree. She was supposed to, my job, Doris gasped, trying again to sit up. I have to call. I have to tell them I'm. Keisha's hand remained firm. Ma'am, you need to listen to me. You have a severe concussion. 3 broken ribs. Your left shoulder is dislocated. We had to pop it back in while you were unconscious. You've got internal bruising, and you're lucky you didn't crack your skull open. The doctor is going to tell you the same thing I'm telling you now. You're not going anywhere for at least 2 weeks. Maybe longer. 2 weeks. The words landed with more force than the fall itself. 2 weeks without work meant 2 weeks without pay. The George Mansion. Would they even hold her position? The office building. They'd just hire someone else, someone whose body wasn't broken, someone reliable. 2 weeks meant rent she couldn't pay, food she couldn't buy, bills that didn't stop coming just because you couldn't stand up without screaming. I can't, Doris started, but her voice broke. I can't afford 2 weeks. Keisha's eyes held something that looked like recognition, like she'd heard this before, like maybe she'd lived some version of it herself. I know, honey. I know. But you can't afford to die, either. Your girls need you alive more than they need you working. The twins were allowed in 20 minutes later, after the doctor had confirmed what Keisha already told her. They moved into the room like small ghosts, their eyes too wide, their faces carrying expressions no 9-year-old should have to wear. Jessica started crying the moment she saw her mother, quiet tears that slid down her face without sound. Jennifer didn't cry. She just walked straight to the bed and took Doris's hand in both of hers. Her grip so tight it hurt, like she was trying to physically hold her mother to the earth. It's okay, babies, Doris whispered, even though it was a lie. Mama's going to be fine. Mrs. Patterson from across the hall took the girls home that evening. The neighbor was 73 with arthritis and a pension that barely covered her own rent, but she was there anyway, promising to feed them dinner and make sure they got to bed on time. Jennifer navigated the bus route home with the competence of someone far older than 9, The same route her mother took every day, the same stops, the same transfer at 5 Point Station. She held Jessica's hand the entire way, counted the money in her pocket twice to make sure they had enough for the fare. When they opened the apartment door, reality was waiting for them. The eviction notice had been upgraded. Red letters now. Final notice. 3 days to pay $950 or vacate the premises. The refrigerator held a half-gallon of milk, some eggs, bread that would be good for maybe 2 more days. In the cabinet, rice, a can of beans, peanut butter running low. On the kitchen counter, in their mother's careful handwriting, the list of everything due. Rent, $950. Electricity, $143. Water, $67. Phone, $52. Jennifer stared at the numbers. She'd always been good at math. Her teacher said she had a gift for it. But this was different. This was math that mattered. Math that meant survival or catastrophe. Without her mother's income, they had maybe a week. Less than that, actually, if the landlord followed through on the eviction notice. Jessica climbed into bed early, exhausted from crying, from fear, from being 9 years old, and watching her mother disappear into an ambulance. Jennifer tucked her in, whispered the same things their mother whispered. It's okay. We're going to be okay. But after Jessica fell asleep, Jennifer stood in the doorway of their mother's empty bedroom and let herself think the thought she'd been holding back all day. What if they weren't okay? What if this was the thing that finally broke them? Her eyes landed on the navy blue uniform hanging on the bathroom door. She walked toward it slowly, her hand reaching out to touch the rough fabric. It still smelled like the cleaning supplies her mother used, like lemon and bleach and hard work. Jennifer thought about the George mansion. She'd heard her mother talk about it enough times, the marble floors, the imported tile, the kitchen bigger than their entire apartment. She'd heard her mother recite the security code once when she was on the phone with another cleaner, 0724. She thought about her mother's body broken in a hospital bed. She thought about the eviction notice. She thought about Jessica sleeping in the next room, trusting that her big sister would fix this somehow. And Jennifer, 9 years old, 73 pounds, still believing that love could be enough if you were just brave enough, made a decision that would change everything. They would go to the mansion. They would do their mother's job. They would save what was left of their world, even if it meant risking everything they had. There was no other choice. Not for children who'd already learned that the world doesn't catch you when you fall. Jennifer's alarm went off at 4:15 a.m., the same time their mother's phone usually screamed her awake. She'd barely slept. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw her mother's face in that hospital bed, pale and broken, trying to smile like everything would be okay. Jessica woke to her sister's hand on her shoulder, gentle but insistent. Jenny? Her voice was thick with sleep, confused. What's happening? Is Mama's okay, Jennifer whispered, though she didn't know if that was true. But we have to do something. Get up. Jessica sat up, rubbing her eyes, and that's when she saw it. Their mother's navy blue uniform laid out on the bed like a ghost. Her eyes went wide, comprehension dawning with the terrible clarity that comes when you're 9 years old and the world has already taught you that safety is an illusion. Jenny, we can't, we have to. Jennifer's voice was steady, but her hands shook as she picked up the uniform. If Mama loses her job, we lose the apartment. I heard the landlord yesterday when he was putting up the notice. He said final notice. That means they're going to make us leave, Jess. Where are we going to go? Jessica's bottom lip trembled. But we're just kids. We don't know how to. We've watched Mama 100 times. We know what she does. We know how to clean. Jennifer held up the uniform. We can do this. We have to do this. The uniform swallowed them both. They'd chosen Jennifer to wear it because she was bigger by maybe 3 pounds, but that hardly mattered. The sleeves hung past her hands like deflated balloons. She rolled them up once, twice, 3 times, 4, 5, until her wrists finally appeared. The waist gaped so wide it looked like a dress made for someone 3 times her size. Jessica found a jump rope in their closet, and they tied it around Jennifer's middle, cinching the fabric into awkward bunches. They stood together in the bathroom mirror under the fluorescent light that buzzed and flickered. What looked back at them was absurd, a child drowning in adult clothes, trying to play a game that wasn't a game at all. Except there was nothing playful about the fear in their eyes. Nothing innocent about the way Jessica's hands twisted together or the set of Jennifer's jaw. We look stupid, Jessica whispered. We look like we're trying. Jennifer turned away from the mirror before the reflection could convince her this was impossible. That's all we can do. Their mother's purse sat on the kitchen counter where Mrs. Patterson had left it. Jennifer felt like a thief going through it, even though Mama had always told them they could ask for anything. But you couldn't ask permission for something you knew would get a no. She found the work schedule folded in the inside pocket, a handwritten list in their mother's careful printing. Monday, George Mansion, 7 a.m. Office building downtown, 10 a.m. Wednesday, George Mansion, 7 a.m. Henderson Residence, 11 a.m. Friday, George Mansion, 7 a.m. Office building downtown, 10 a.m. Today was Friday. Jennifer's hands trembled as she memorized the address. 1247, Blackland Road, Northwest Buckhead. She knew about Buckhead the way you know about places you'll never go, from overheard conversations, from news stories about charity galas and corporate headquarters. It was where rich people lived, where the houses had names instead of numbers, where people like her mother only existed to make things clean. They left the apartment at 5:30, locking the door with the spare key hidden under the mat. The morning was still dark, the city sleeping except for delivery trucks and people whose lives ran on desperation instead of choice. The bus stop was 3 blocks away. Jennifer had counted the money in her mother's purse twice, $37 in bills, a handful of change. She took $6, enough for both of them to ride there and back with a little left over just in case. The bus arrived at 5:48, its brakes hissing like something tired and mechanical. The driver was an older black man with gray in his beard who glanced at them but didn't ask questions. Maybe he'd seen too much to be surprised by children on buses before sunrise. Maybe he just didn't care. Jennifer fed the bills into the machine with hands that wouldn't stop shaking. The bus lurched forward, and they found seats near the back. Jessica pressed against her sister like she was trying to become one person instead of two. The ride to Buckhead took 43 minutes and felt like 43 years. Every stop, every person who got on, every glance in their direction made Jennifer's heart hammer against her ribs. A woman across the aisle kept staring, middle-aged, wearing scrubs, probably heading to a hospital shift. Her eyes moved from Jennifer's too large uniform to Jessica's white-knuckle grip on the seat in front of them. Jennifer could feel the question forming, could see the woman's mouth opening. "Y'all okay?" the woman asked, her voice gentle but concerned. "Where's your mama?" Jennifer had practiced this. She'd practiced it in her head 100 times between the apartment and the bus stop. "Our mama is meeting us," she said, her voice steady despite the terror clawing at her throat. "We're fine, thank you." The woman's eyes narrowed slightly, unconvinced, but she didn't push. Just nodded slowly and went back to staring out the window. A man near the front, white, wearing a suit that probably cost more than 3 months of their rent, turned around to look at them. "You girls going to school?" "Yes, sir," Jennifer lied. "Early program." He seemed to accept this, or at least didn't care enough to question it further. Jessica was crying silently, tears sliding down her cheeks without sound. Jennifer took her hand and squeezed it 3 times, their secret code. "I love you. We're okay. I'm here." The bus turned onto Blackland Road, and everything changed. The houses got bigger. The lawns got wider. Trees lined the streets like sentries guarding wealth. This wasn't just a different neighborhood. It was a different world. "Next stop," Jennifer whispered. They got off at the corner of Blackland and West Pace's Ferry Road. The moment their feet hit the sidewalk, the enormity of what they were doing crashed over them like a wave. The George estate wasn't just big. It was enormous, a sprawling contemporary structure of glass and steel that seemed to grow out of the landscape itself, all clean lines and angles that suggested precision and money in equal measure. The property stretched across what must have been 3 acres, surrounded by a black iron fence that looked decorative but probably cost more than their entire apartment building. The gate had a keypad, a small camera perched above it, its red light blinking like an eye. Jennifer's hands shook so badly she had to press them against her legs to make them stop. She thought about turning around, about going home, about admitting this was insane. Then she thought about the eviction notice, about their mother in a hospital bed, about Jessica standing next to her, trusting that her big sister had a plan that would save them. She stepped up to the keypad and entered the code she'd heard her mother mention once, months ago, when she was on the phone with another cleaner, 0724. Mr. George's birthday. For 3 seconds, nothing happened. Jennifer's heart stopped. Then the gate clicked. hummed, began to slide open. "Oh my God," Jessica breathed. "Jenny, it worked." They walked through like they were crossing into enemy territory. The driveway was smooth black asphalt that curved through manicured landscaping, plants that probably had names Jennifer would never learn, maintained by people who were paid to make nature look deliberate. The house loomed larger with every step. Up close, it was even more intimidating, floor-to-ceiling windows that reflected the pre-dawn sky, a front door that looked like it belonged to a museum, outdoor lighting that activated as they approached. "Service entrance," Jennifer whispered, remembering her mother's descriptions. "Mama always uses the service entrance. Around the side." They followed the path around the east wing of the house, their footsteps too loud in the morning silence. The service entrance was unmarked but obvious, a simpler door, no grand columns or architectural flourishes. Just function. Jennifer tried the handle. Unlocked. The kitchen they entered was bigger than their entire apartment. Gleaming stainless steel appliances. Marble countertops that looked like they'd been carved from single pieces of stone. A refrigerator that was probably worth more than their mother made in a year. Everything was spotless. Everything smelled like lemons and money. That particular scent of expensive cleaning products and spaces where people paid other people to ensure nothing was ever dirty. "Where's the supplies?" Jessica whispered, as if speaking at normal volume might trigger an alarm. Jennifer's mind raced through her mother's descriptions. Closet near the laundry room. Mama said it's past the kitchen, down the hall. They found it exactly where it should be, a door marked only by its plainness in a house where everything else screamed wealth. Inside, industrial cleaner in large bottles, brushes with hard bristles, mops, rags, gloves that would be too big for their hands. Jennifer grabbed what she could carry. Her mother's voice played in her head, a catalog of instructions she'd absorbed without meaning to. "Start with the bathrooms, baby. Then the kitchen. Floors always last, because otherwise you just track dirt on them again." But the bathrooms felt too intimate, too risky. They'd be deeper in the house. The foyer, the grand entrance hall their mother always mentioned, seemed safer, more public. If they got caught there, maybe they could run. They made their way toward the front of the house, their supplies rattling with every step. The foyer took Jennifer's breath away. Marble floors in cream and gray stretched 20 feet in every direction. A spiral staircase curved upward like something from a movie. Art on the walls that was probably worth more than they could imagine. A chandelier overhead that caught the early morning light and turned it into tiny rainbows. This was where people walked who'd never worried about rent, where shoes that cost hundreds of dollars touched floors that people like their mother made perfect. Jennifer knelt on the marble. It was cold even through her pants. She poured cleaner into a bucket, added water from a bathroom nearby, and started to scrub. Jessica knelt beside her, her small hands gripping a brush that was too big for her. "Like this? Small circles." Mama always says small circles work the dirt loose. They worked with desperate focus, their arms moving in rhythm, their breath coming quick and shallow. The marble was already clean. Their mother had probably been here 2 days ago, but they scrubbed anyway, needing to prove they could do this, needing to be useful, needing to save what was left of their lives. Time disappeared into the sound of bristles against stone. Jennifer's shoulders began to ache. Jessica's hands turned red from the cold water and the repetitive motion. They didn't hear the footsteps on the stairs. They didn't see the shadow until it fell across them, blocking the light from the chandelier. Then a voice, deep, shocked, carrying the weight of authority and wealth and power, shattered the silence. "What are you doing in my house?" Jennifer's hands released the brush. It clattered against the marble like a gunshot. Jessica made a sound that wasn't quite a scream, wasn't quite a sob. Benjamin George stood 10 feet away in pajama pants and a t-shirt, his phone in one hand, his face transformed by fury and confusion. He was tall, over 6 feet, and even in sleep clothes, he radiated the kind of presence that came from years of being obeyed without question. Jennifer couldn't move, couldn't breathe. Her mind screamed at her to run, but her legs had turned to stone. Jessica was crying now, full body sobs that made her shake. And the man, this billionaire whose floors they'd been cleaning, whose house they'd invaded, whose mercy was the only thing standing between them and complete disaster, took a step closer, his eyes moving from their faces to the oversized uniform to the cleaning supplies scattered across his perfect marble floor. I asked you a question, he said, his voice quieter now, but no less terrifying. What are two children doing in my house at 6 o'clock in the morning? Benjamin George was not a man accustomed to feeling powerless. He'd built an empire from code and vision, turned a single brilliant idea into a company worth billions, navigated boardrooms full of sharks who'd tried to devour him whole. He'd stared down venture capitalists and corporate raiders and competitors who wanted him destroyed. He'd won every time. But standing in his foyer at 6 in the morning, looking at two terrified children kneeling on his marble floor, he felt something he hadn't experienced in decades, the complete absence of control. The smaller one, identical to her sister except for the way fear had frozen her entirely, was crying so hard her whole body shook. The other one, the one wearing the uniform that swallowed her like a tent, was trying not to cry. Her chin trembled. Her hands were clasped together so tightly her knuckles had gone pale. I'm waiting, Benjamin said, and hated how harsh his voice sounded. Tell me what you're doing here. The girl in the uniform took a breath that sounded like it hurt. Then she did something that would haunt Benjamin for the rest of his life. She dropped to her knees, her hands still clasped together like she was praying, and looked up at him with eyes that had already seen too much. Please, sir, she whispered. Please don't call the police. The words hit him like a physical blow. Police. These children thought he was going to have them arrested. Our mama is Doris Welch, sir. The girl's voice was shaking, but she pushed through anyway, each word an act of desperate courage. She cleans your house on Wednesdays and Fridays. She fell down the stairs outside our building 3 days ago. The hospital said she has 3 broken ribs and a concussion and a dislocated shoulder, and she has to rest for 2 weeks. But if she doesn't work, we. Her voice cracked. Broke. She pressed her lips together hard, trying to hold it in. We'll lose our apartment, she continued, the words tumbling out now like a dam had burst. The landlord put up a final notice. We only have 3 days. And there's no food and mama can't work, and we thought if we came and did her job, maybe you wouldn't fire her. Maybe you'd let her keep working when she gets better. Please, sir. We're good cleaners. We promise. We've watched mama our whole lives. We know how to do it right. Benjamin felt something shift in his chest. The fury that had propelled him down the stairs evaporated, replaced by something much more complicated. Something that felt like memory and grief and recognition all tangled together. He looked at these children, really looked at them. 9 years old, maybe 10. Too small for the world they were trying to navigate. The uniform hanging off the older one like evidence of an impossible burden. The cleaning supplies scattered around them. The marble floor they'd been scrubbing, trying to save their mother's job, trying to save their home, trying to save everything with nothing but their small hands and their enormous love. He saw himself, not in circumstance. His mansion and their poverty couldn't be more different, but in desperation. In the terrible arithmetic of childhood, when you realize the adults you depend on are fragile, mortal, capable of breaking. Benjamin George was 40 years old, a self-made billionaire featured on magazine covers and quoted in business journals. But before all that, he'd been something else, a child who watched his mother, Sarah George, work 3 jobs after his father walked out on them. He was 8 years old the first time he understood what exhaustion looked like on a human face. His mother working the factory night shift, coming home at 6 a.m. smelling like industrial soap and sweat, trying to sleep for 3 hours before her day shift started at the grocery store. He remembered trying to help, cleaning their tiny apartment in Savannah, thinking if he could just make things easier, maybe she wouldn't look so tired. Maybe she'd smile the way she used to before his father left. He remembered promising himself, lying in bed in that apartment where the heat barely worked and the neighbors fought through thin walls, that one day he'd make enough money that his mother would never have to work again. He'd kept that promise, built his company, made his first million at 28. But his mother died at 53, 2 years before his company went public, her body worn out from decades of work that ground people down to nothing. He'd bought her a house she never lived in, set up a trust fund she never touched. All the money in the world, arriving exactly too late. How old are you? Benjamin asked, his voice softer now, the anger completely gone. 9, sir, the girl said. Both of us. We're twins. 9. The same age he'd been when he'd made that promise to himself. When he believed that love and determination could overcome anything if you just worked hard enough. Benjamin crouched down slowly, bringing himself to the girl's level. His movement made them flinch. The smaller one actually gasped, and he hated that. Hated that he was the source of their terror. "I'm not going to hurt you," he said quietly. "And I'm not calling the police. Just breathe, okay? Both of you." The girls stared at him like he was speaking a language they didn't understand. "Where is your mother now?" he asked. "Grady Hospital, sir," Jennifer answered. "But she's supposed to come home today. Our neighbor, Mrs. Patterson, she's watching her right now. We told her we were going to school early. For a project." Another lie they'd had to tell. Another adult they'd had to deceive because the world had given them no other options. "And your father?" The smaller twin spoke for the first time, her voice barely audible. "He died when we were babies. Car accident. It's just us and Mama." Benjamin closed his eyes. Behind his eyelids, he saw his own mother's hands, permanently calloused, the skin cracked from too many chemicals, joints swollen from repetitive motion. He saw her falling asleep in her chair, still wearing her work uniform, because she was too tired to change. He saw her trying to hide how much pain she was in, trying to smile for him, trying to pretend everything was fine when nothing was fine. When he opened his eyes, he'd made a decision that would horrify his financial advisor, confuse his business partners, and probably make the news if it got out. But it was the only decision he could live with. "Get up," he said gently. "Both of you." The twins rose on trembling legs, the smaller one gripping her sister's hand. "You're not in trouble," Benjamin continued. "But you're also not cleaning my floors." He pulled out his phone, scrolling through contacts. "I'm going to make some calls. First, I'm going to make sure your mother gets the best medical care in Atlanta. Not Grady, Piedmont. Private room. Whatever specialist she needs." Jennifer's eyes went wide. "Sir, we can't. We don't have insurance that covers. I'm covering it." He held up a hand before she could protest. "Second, I'm going to make sure you don't lose your apartment." "What's your landlord's name?" "Mr. Henderson, sir. But the rent is $950, and we don't. I'll handle it. I'll have my assistant call him within the hour." He kept scrolling through his contacts, his mind already 10 steps ahead. And third, he looked at them, really looked at them, seeing not intruders or charity cases or problems to be solved, but two children who loved their mother enough to break into a stranger's home, who loved her enough to risk everything, who loved her with the kind of fierce devotion that made them brave beyond reason. "I'm going to make sure your mother has a job when she's ready to work again. A better job." Jessica burst into tears, not the silent kind from before, but great heaving sobs that sounded like something breaking open. Jennifer grabbed her sister's hand, her voice barely a whisper. "Why?" she asked. "Why would you help us?" Benjamin thought about his mother, about hands worn raw from work, about love so fierce it outlasted exhaustion and poverty and the grinding cruelty of a world that took everything and gave nothing back, about the promise he'd made as a child and kept too late, about the guilt he carried, not for anything he'd done wrong, but for everything he'd done right while she was already gone. "Because someone should have helped us," he said simply. "My mother worked herself to death trying to give me a better life. I made it, built all this." He gestured at the mansion around them, at the wealth that couldn't bring her back. "But I was too late to help her. I couldn't save her." He looked down at these two girls who were trying to save their mother with cleaning supplies and courage. "I wasn't there to help when it mattered," he continued. "But I'm here now. And you girls, what you did this morning. Breaking in here, risking arrest, trying to do your mother's job so she wouldn't lose it." His voice caught. "That's the bravest thing I've ever seen. And I'm not going to let that bravery go to waste." Jennifer was crying now too, tears streaming down her face. "We were so scared," she whispered. "I know," Benjamin said. "But you did it anyway. That's what makes it brave." He started making calls. First to his assistant, Marcus, who answered on the second ring despite it being barely 6:30 in the morning. "I need you to do 3 things immediately," Benjamin said, his voice carrying the authority of someone used to being obeyed. "First, call Piedmont Hospital. Transfer a patient named Doris Welch from Grady to their private wing. Best room available. All expenses covered. Set up a meeting with their best orthopedic specialist for today." "Sir, is this related to?" "Second, call a landlord named Henderson. Find out which property management company he works for. I want the rent for Doris Welch's apartment paid in full for the next 6 months. And I want any eviction proceedings stopped immediately. Mr. George, can I ask?" "Third, I need you to draft an employment contract. Position, facilities coordinator. Salary," he paused, thinking. What would change someone's life? What would mean dignity instead of survival? $75,000 a year. Full benefits. Start date flexible based on medical clearance. Silence on the other end of the line. Then Marcus, carefully, "Sir, is this legal trouble? Should I call our attorneys?" "It's not legal trouble. It's the opposite of trouble. Just do it, Marcus. And send a car to." He looked at Jennifer. "What's your address?" She gave it to him, her voice shaking. "Send a car to pick up 2 girls and take them home. Then send another car to Grady Hospital to transport their mother to Piedmont. I want this done within 2 hours." He hung up, looked at the twins, who were staring at him like he'd just performed a miracle. "You're going to go home," he said. "A car will take you. And you're going to tell Mrs. Patterson that your mother is being transferred to a better hospital for better care. You're going to tell her that rent is covered and food is covered and that you don't need to worry anymore." "I don't understand," Jennifer whispered. Benjamin crouched down again, meeting her eyes. "Your mother spent her life taking care of you. Now someone's going to take care of her. And when she's better, she's going to have a job that pays her what she's worth, not for cleaning floors, but for managing the people who do. Dignity. Respect. Enough money that you never have to do what you did this morning ever again." Jessica's voice was small and wondering. "Are you an angel?" Benjamin laughed, a sound that surprised him because it was genuine. "No, sweetheart. I'm just someone who remembers what it was like to be scared and small and desperate to save the person I loved most. And I'm someone who finally has the power to do something about it." He stood up, pulling his phone out again. There were more calls to make, lawyers to mobilize, systems to navigate. But for the first time in years, maybe since his mother died, he felt like his wealth meant something beyond numbers in an account. "Come on," he said gently. "Let's get you 2 some breakfast while we wait for the car. And then we're going to fix this. All of it." The twins followed him toward the kitchen, still holding hands, still trembling slightly, but the terror in their eyes had been replaced by something else. Hope. Fragile and new, but real. And Benjamin George, billionaire, orphan, the man who'd made a promise too late, felt the ghosts he carried finally begin to quiet. Doris Welch woke in a room that didn't make sense. The ceiling was the wrong color cream instead of institutional gray. The walls had art on them, actual paintings in frames, not safety posters about hand washing. Sunlight streamed through floor-to-ceiling windows that overlooked the Atlanta skyline instead of a parking lot. For a disoriented moment, she thought she was dreaming. Or dead. Or both. Then the pain reminded her she was very much alive. Her ribs throbbed with each breath. Her shoulder felt like it was being held together by spite and medication. But even the pain felt different here, managed, controlled, like someone was paying attention to it. A nurse appeared, young, professional, wearing scrubs that looked new. "Oh good, you're awake. How's your pain level, Mrs. Welch?" 1 to 10. "Where am I?" Doris's voice came out hoarse. "What happened to Grady?" "You're at Piedmont, Atlanta. You were transferred this morning. Doctor's orders." The nurse checked her with practiced efficiency. "You've got some visitors waiting. Are you up for that?" Before Doris could answer, the door opened and her world tilted on its axis. Jennifer and Jessica rushed in, their faces lighting up in a way that made Doris's chest ache worse than her broken ribs. Behind them, a man in an expensive suit, charcoal gray, tailored perfectly, the kind of suit she'd seen on executives in the buildings she cleaned but never up close. "Mama." Jessica was crying already, careful not to hug too hard. Jennifer gripped her hand, her eyes red-rimmed like she'd been crying too. "Babies," what Doris tried to sit up and gasped. The man moved forward instinctively, then stopped himself, giving her space. "Mrs. Welch," he said, his voice measured and calm. "I'm Benjamin George. Your daughters are remarkably brave and resourceful. We need to talk about your employment situation." The world stopped. Benjamin George, her employer, the man whose mansion she cleaned, whose privacy she protected, whose floors she scrubbed on her hands and knees. Panic flooded through her like ice water. "Sir, I'm so sorry they bothered you." The words tumbled out in a rush. "I didn't know they were going to whatever they did. I'll make it right. I'll be back to work as soon as the doctor clears me. I promise, sir. Please don't, Mrs. Welch." His voice was firm but kind, cutting through her panic. "Stop. You misunderstand. You're not in trouble. Your daughters aren't in trouble." He pulled a chair closer to her bed and sat down, bringing himself to her eye level. "But the situation you're in? That ends today." Doris stared at him, her mind struggling to process his words. Not in trouble. But then why was he here? Why were her daughters looking at her with something that looked like hope? What followed was a conversation that Doris would replay in her mind for years, examining it from every angle, trying to understand how her life had changed in the space of 20 minutes. Benjamin explained methodically, like he was presenting a business plan. Full medical coverage, everything Grady had done, everything Piedmont would do, all of it covered. Every test, every specialist, every medication. The rent paid for 6 months. The eviction notice canceled. Food allowance. Utilities covered. Doris's head spun. I can't accept charity, sir. It's not charity. It's investment. He leaned forward. When you're healed, and I mean fully healed, not rushed back to work before you're ready, you're not coming back as a cleaner. I'm creating a new position. Facilities coordinator for my estate and my downtown office building. You'll manage the cleaning staff instead of being part of it. Salary is $75,000 a year. Full benefits. Health insurance. Dental. Vision. Retirement matching. The numbers didn't compute. $75,000. She made $18,000 now, cobbled together from 3 different cleaning jobs. $75,000 was I don't understand, Doris whispered, tears sliding down her face. Why would you do this? You don't know. Me. You don't know anything about me except I clean your house. Benjamin glanced at the twins, who were gripping each other's hands in the visitor chairs, their eyes wide and shining. Your daughters broke into my house this morning at 6 a.m. They were on their knees scrubbing my marble floor in a uniform 5 sizes too big, trying to do your job so you wouldn't lose it. Doris's hand flew to her mouth. Oh my God. Jennifer. Jessica. They weren't stealing. They weren't vandalizing. They were cleaning. Benjamin's voice was quiet but intense. They were 9 years old and terrified and desperate, and they were trying to save you. Do you understand what that means? What kind of love that takes? Doris looked at her daughters, seeing them differently now. Not as the babies she'd been trying to protect, but as people who'd tried to protect her right back. My mother loved me like that once, Benjamin continued. Worked 3 jobs. Wore herself down to nothing trying to give me a better life. I built an empire, Mrs. Welch. I have more money than I could spend in 5 lifetimes. But I never got to repay her. She died before I could show her that her sacrifice meant something. His voice cracked on the last word. He cleared his throat. Maybe I can't repay her, he said, but maybe I can repay it forward. Your daughters reminded me what matters. They reminded me what wealth is supposed to be for. Doris couldn't speak, couldn't breathe, could only cry as this stranger, this billionaire, who didn't know her anything, handed her a future she'd stopped believing was possible. The ripple effect started immediately. Benjamin's assistant, Marcus, arrived that afternoon with contracts and documentation. But Benjamin was already thinking bigger. He called his property management company, the one that handled staffing for his properties, and demanded a full audit of every cleaning staff member. What he found made him furious. Doris was one of 15 people working without proper contracts. No benefits. No sick days. No overtime pay despite regularly working more than 40 hours a week. The management company had been charging him premium rates for professional cleaning services while paying the actual cleaners poverty wages and pocketing the difference. He fired the management company that same day, called each of the 15 cleaners personally, offered them direct employment with his company, proper contracts, benefits, fair wages, dignity. 12 of them cried on the phone. 2 thought it was a scam. 1 asked if she could bring her cousin, who also needed work. The story leaked within a week. A reporter from the Atlanta Journal-Constitution got a tip from someone at Piedmont Hospital about a billionaire paying for a cleaning woman's medical care. She started digging. Benjamin could have buried it. His lawyers offered 3 different strategies for keeping it quiet. He declined all of them. Instead, he gave an interview. Told the story himself, the 2 girls breaking in, their desperate courage, his own mother's sacrifice. He didn't name Doris or the twins, protecting their privacy, but he was honest about everything else. We have a system that allows people to work themselves to death and still not afford to live, he told the reporter. That's not capitalism. That's cruelty. And if I'm not using my wealth to change that, what's the point of having it? The article ran on the front page. Within days, 3 Atlanta nonprofits contacted him about partnering on employment initiatives for working single parents. He said yes to all of them, created a foundation, committed $10 million to start. Not everyone was pleased. Some of his business associates questioned his judgment over cocktails and golf games. A particularly cruel op-ed in a business publication written by someone who'd never missed a meal in his life suggested Benjamin was being manipulated by a sob story and setting a dangerous precedent of rewarding failure. Benjamin had the article framed, hung it in his office with a note below in his own handwriting. The day I stop being moved by sob stories is the day I stop being human. Jennifer and Jessica, no longer carrying the crushing weight of their family's survival, began to bloom in ways that astonished everyone who knew them. Benjamin arranged tutoring not because they were behind, but because he wanted to see what they could do without poverty dragging them down. Jennifer's math teacher called him after 3 sessions, her voice awed. "Mr. George, this child is extraordinary. She's doing calculus concepts intuitively. She needs advanced placement. She needs competition math. She needs whatever she needs," Benjamin said. Cost is not a factor. Jessica's gift was different, but equally profound. She wrote poetry that made adults cry, simple, devastating observations about love and fear and hope that shouldn't have been possible from a 9-year-old. But Jessica had lived more emotional complexity in 9 years than most people experienced in 50. Benjamin connected her with a writing mentor, enrolled her in a creative writing program at Emory designed for gifted students, bought her journals and books, and listened when she shyly read her work aloud. He didn't do these things publicly, didn't post about it on social media, or use it for PR. He did it because he'd learned something from 2 small girls kneeling on his marble floor, that the truest measure of wealth wasn't what you accumulated, but what you gave away when no one was watching. 3 months after the fall, Doris sat in Benjamin's office not as a cleaner, but as his facilities coordinator. She wore business casual, carried a tablet for scheduling, managed 12 people with fairness and respect born from years of being invisible herself. "Mrs. Welch," Benjamin said during one of their weekly meetings, "I need to ask you something." She looked up, still not quite comfortable with this new dynamic. "Yes, sir?" "Stop calling me sir. We're colleagues now." He smiled. "I wanted to thank you." "Thank me?" "Mr. George, you saved our lives." "No, your daughter's courage saved your lives. I just opened a door." "But you," he gestured at the spreadsheets on her tablet, the improved efficiency in his buildings, the staff retention rates that had gone up 40%. "You've taken that opportunity and built something real. You've managed to make my properties run better while treating people with dignity. That's rare." Doris felt tears prickling her eyes. "I just remember what it felt like to be invisible. I don't want anyone on my team to feel that way." "Exactly," Benjamin said. "That's why this works. That's why it matters." That evening, Doris stood in her new apartment, still modest, but clean and safe and warm. The twins were at the kitchen table doing homework, laughing about something, their voices light and unencumbered by the weight they'd carried for so long. She thought about the woman she'd been 6 months ago, broken on concrete, terrified of losing everything. She thought about the woman she was now, employed, stable, able to dream. The transformation wasn't just economic. It was deeper than that. It was the knowledge that someone had seen her, really seen her, and decided she mattered. That her work had value. That her daughters deserved futures not limited by their zip code. And somewhere across the city, in a mansion full of marble and glass, Benjamin George looked at the framed op-ed on his wall and smiled. The writer had called him naive, soft, a fool who'd let emotions override business sense. Maybe he was all those things. But he'd also learned what his mother had tried to teach him, and he'd understood too late, that the richest investment wasn't in stocks or real estate or tech startups. It was in people, in the recognition that we save ourselves by saving each other, in the radical act of seeing someone's humanity and choosing to honor it. That, Benjamin had finally learned, was wealth that actually mattered. 6 months after the fall, Doris Welch stood in her new apartment, watching morning light flood through windows that faced east. The sun turned everything golden: the small dining table where the twins ate breakfast, the kitchen where the refrigerator actually worked, the living room where they could all sit together without tripping over each other. 2 bedrooms. Real bedrooms with doors that closed and walls thick enough that she couldn't hear every sound the neighbors made. The twins had their own room now, decorated in soft blues and greens, with twin beds that actually matched, and desks for homework, and bookshelves that Benjamin's assistant had helped them fill with books Jennifer and Jessica had chosen themselves. Doris ran her hand along the kitchen counter laminate, Not marble, but clean and hers. The apartment was in a better neighborhood, the kind where children played outside without supervision and the elevator actually worked and the stairs had lights that stayed on. It wasn't luxury, but it was safety. It was possibility. It was a place where she could breathe without counting the cost of every breath. She'd been working as facilities coordinator for 3 months now. The transformation still felt surreal some mornings, putting on business casual instead of a cleaning uniform, carrying a tablet instead of a mop, managing a team instead of being invisible. She oversaw 12 people across Benjamin's properties, and she ran the operation with a philosophy born from years of being overlooked. Everyone on her team had a name, a story, and dignity that didn't depend on their job title. When Maria called in sick, Doris didn't dock her pay. When James needed to leave early for his daughter's school play, Doris adjusted the schedule without complaint. When Patricia confessed she couldn't afford new work shoes, Doris authorized a clothing allowance she negotiated into the department budget. "You're too soft," one of Benjamin's property managers had told her once. "These people will take advantage. These people have names," Doris had replied quietly. "And they work harder when they're treated like human beings instead of equipment." Staff retention went up. Efficiency improved. Benjamin never questioned her methods. But the transformation wasn't just economic. It ran deeper than paychecks and benefits and apartments with working appliances. At the twin school, a better one now, in a district where teachers had resources and classrooms weren't overcrowded, Jennifer had been placed in the advanced math program. Her teacher, Ms. Rodriguez, had called Doris in wonder after the first month. "Mrs. Welch, your daughter is extraordinary. She's doing work 2 grade levels above her age. We'd like to enter her in the regional math competition." Jennifer placed second in the city. Doris took a half-day off work to attend the award ceremony, not sneaking away with guilt and fear of being fired, but with her supervisor's blessing and genuine congratulations. She sat in the audience watching her daughter accept a trophy almost as big as she was, and Doris cried because this was a future she'd stopped believing was possible. Jessica had joined the creative writing club. Once a month, the club held poetry readings in the school library, and Jessica had performed twice now. Her pieces were devastatingly honest observations about poverty and fear and love that shouldn't have been accessible to a 10-year-old, but were, because Jessica had lived through things that aged you in ways that had nothing to do with years. Her latest poem was called "The Day the Floor Knew Our Names." She performed it at the last reading, her voice small but steady. "We scrubbed so hard our hands went red the marble didn't care. We thought if we could make it clean, maybe he wouldn't know we'd been there. But floors don't keep your secrets and money hears everything when you're small and scared and desperate. Even silence has a sting." Then a voice said, "What are you doing?" And we thought our world would end, but the floor. That day learned something. Sometimes strangers become friends. Half the audience had been in tears by the final stanza. Doris had been sobbing openly. And in the back row, trying to be inconspicuous but failing because he was 6'2" and wearing a suit that cost more than some cars, Benjamin George had been wiping his eyes too. He didn't make a big show of his continued involvement, didn't announce his presence or draw attention. But he was there at Jennifer's math competition, sitting 3 rows back and cheering when she won second place. At Jessica's poetry readings, listening with the kind of attention that made the words matter. At the twin school fundraiser, writing a check that kept the arts program running for another year. When Doris tried to thank him, he'd wave it off. "I'm just attending public events," he'd said. Anyone could do that. But they both knew it was more than that. On the 1-year anniversary of the twins' desperate morning at his mansion, Benjamin invited them to dinner. Not at the mansion. Doris had been there plenty of times now, for work meetings and planning sessions. He chose a modest restaurant in their neighborhood instead, a family-owned Italian place with red checker tablecloths and breadsticks that came warm from the oven. The twins were excited, chattering about their day as they walked in. Jennifer had aced her algebra test. Jessica had been chosen to read her work at a city-wide youth poetry event. They were children again, not small adults carrying impossible burdens, but actual kids who could be excited about breadsticks and worried about normal things like whether their hair looked okay. Benjamin was already seated when they arrived. He stood up, smiling, and Doris was struck again by how different he seemed from the man who'd shouted at her daughters a year ago. Or maybe not different, maybe she just understood it better now. Saw the grief he carried, the guilt, the way he was trying to build something meaningful out of money that had come too late to save the person who mattered most. They ordered pasta and salads. The twins told Benjamin about school. He listened like their stories were the most important thing in the world. Then, as they were waiting for dessert, Benjamin set down his water glass and looked at all three of them with an expression Doris couldn't quite read. "I need to thank you," he said. Doris blinked. "Thank us, sir?" "Benjamin," he corrected gently. "We've been over this. And yes, thank you." He looked at the twins. "A year ago, you two did something that changed my life. You probably don't realize it, but you did." Jessica tilted her head, curious. Jennifer leaned forward slightly. "I built a successful company," Benjamin continued. "I have more money than I could spend in 5 lifetimes. I got a mansion and cars and investments and all the things people say they want. But I've forgotten the most important thing my mother tried to teach me. That wealth without compassion is just numbers in an account." His voice was quiet but intense. The restaurant noise faded into background static. "You two reminded me what matters," he said, looking directly at the twins. "You risked everything for love. You broke into a stranger's house to try to save your mother. You were 9 years old and terrified, and you did it anyway." His voice cracked slightly. "That's the bravest thing I've ever seen. And it woke me up to what I'd become, someone who'd let money replace meaning." Jessica's eyes were wide. "Mr. George Benjamin," he corrected with a small smile. "Benjamin," Jessica said carefully. "Our teacher asked us to write about heroes. I wrote about you." Something shifted in Benjamin's expression, surprise, then emotion he was trying to control. "That's very kind, Jessica, but your mother is the hero. I just opened a door. She's the one who built a life worth living through it." Doris felt tears sliding down her face before she realized she was crying. Not tears of sadness or pain or fear, emotions she'd become too familiar with over the years. These were different. These were tears of something she hadn't felt in so long she'd almost forgotten what it was called. Hope that was earned, not wished for. "You gave us more than a job," Doris said, her voice thick. "You gave us dignity. You saw us when we'd gotten used to being invisible." "You were never invisible," Benjamin replied. "I just hadn't been looking." The dessert came tiramisu to share, which the twins attacked with enthusiasm. The conversation shifted to lighter things. School projects, upcoming events, Jennifer's plan to enter the state math competition, Jessica's poem that would be published in a youth literary magazine. Normal things. Beautiful, ordinary, normal things that used to be impossible. As they left the restaurant, walking through the Atlanta evening, Doris watched her daughters walk ahead, laughing about something, their voices light and unencumbered. Jennifer was explaining a math problem to Jessica, who was pretending to understand, but mostly just happy to listen to her sister talk. They looked like what they were, 10-year-old girls with futures that extended beyond next week's rent and tomorrow's meals. Doris thought about the woman she'd been a year ago, broken on hospital sheets, terrified of losing everything, unable to see past the immediate catastrophe of 2 weeks without work. She thought about the woman she was now, employed, stable, able to dream about things like Jennifer's college education and Jessica's writing career and, maybe, someday, a house with a yard. The unthinkable wasn't just that a billionaire had helped them. Atlanta was full of wealthy people. Some of them donated to charity. Some of them even cared. The unthinkable was that Benjamin had helped them see themselves not as people to be pitied, not as sob stories or charity cases or problems to be solved, but as people whose lives had value, whose love had power, whose story deserved a different ending than the one poverty had been writing. He'd given them more than money. He'd given them the thing money couldn't buy, the recognition that they mattered. That Doris's years of invisible labor had worth. That her daughter's desperate courage was heroism, not pathology. That their family's struggle wasn't a personal failing, but a systemic injustice that deserved to be challenged. And in doing so, Benjamin George had discovered what his fortune had always been missing. Not the weight of gold, but the weight of meaning. Not the currency of markets, but the currency of connection. The richest investment of all the recognition that we save ourselves by saving each other. That wealth without purpose is just accumulation, that the truest measure of success isn't what you build but who you lift up along the way. His mother had tried to teach him that. She'd worked herself to exhaustion trying to give him opportunities, showing him through her sacrifice what love looked like when it was desperate and fierce and absolutely unbreakable. He'd learned the lesson too late to save her. But maybe, just maybe, he'd learned it in time to honor her memory by becoming the person she'd hoped he'd be. Not just successful, not just rich, human. Doris looked back at Benjamin, who was walking a few steps behind, giving her and the girl space. He caught her eye and smiled a real smile, unguarded and genuine. She smiled back. And in that moment, on an ordinary Atlanta street on an ordinary Friday evening, something extraordinary completed itself. A circle of grace that had started with two small girls scrubbing a marble floor and ended with four people who understood that the bravest thing any of us can do is see each other's humanity and choose to honor it, even when it costs us something. Especially then. That, Doris finally understood, was what made us human. That was what made us whole. This story honors the truth that dignity isn't given, it's recognized. That wealth means nothing until it's shared, and that sometimes the smallest hands carry the biggest hearts. To all my amazing viewers, thank you. Every time you watch, like, and share my videos, you keep the echoes of love alive. Your support, your comments, and your time mean more than you know. This channel exists because of you. I appreciate you deeply.